Hello everyone. This is a fun video for me because this is where my channel really started about a decade ago, and that is teaching you how to build or code a classic theme of your own. Let's jump right into the action. You will need two things to follow along with me in this video. Number one is local WP, and number two is VS Code. I'm not even going to explain what these two things are in this video because this video is actually part of a playlist or a series on my channel. So if you just click on the playlist as a whole, you will find a video that helps you set up these tools on your computer, right? And explain what they do and how to use them. Cool. So here I have my local WordPress website. It's using the default 2025 theme. And let me show you how easy it is to create our own new theme, a classic theme, in my opinion, what all themes should be, from scratch. So currently, if I go into my dashboard and click on appearance, right, there are the different themes you can choose from. But let me show you how you create your own new theme. You just need to find a certain folder on your computer. So from local WP, I would click site folder here, dig into app, and then dig into public, and then WP content. And then there's a folder called themes. Inside of that, you see one folder for each theme that you have installed. Well, let's just create a brand new folder in the themes folder. So new folder, you could name it anything, but don't have spaces in the file name or the folder name. Use dashes instead of spaces. Just so you and I are on the same page, why don't we call it like our great classic theme? You could call it anything though. You could name it super dash amazing dash pizza. Then just open up that brand new folder that you just created, open that up in VS Code. In this brand new empty folder, we just need to create two files and then it will be ready to activate. So let's right click and choose new file. We need to have a file named index.php. And then we need to create one more file. So right click, new file, and it needs to be named style.css. And then we only need to add like one line of code to each of these files. Let's start with index.php. Why don't we just have a heading level 1, so H1, and then hit tab and say, welcome to our website. And then save that, so Command or Control S, go into style.css, and we need to add a comment, so / asterisk, and then you can drop down and say theme name : and then a space, and let's just make up a name. Let's call it our wonderful theme. And then close out the comment, so asterisk /. Give that a save, and we're already ready. So now you can go back into the dashboard and refresh your appearance screen, and you should now see, if you scroll through your list of themes, here it is, our wonderful theme. I can click activate, and if you go refresh the front end of your website, awesome. I mean, you're not going to win any design awards, but there we see that heading level 1, welcome to our website. Before we worry about design or styling or CSS, let's first worry about outputting real dynamic data here. So like if you go into your dashboard and click on posts, let's try to loop or output our real dynamic blog post titles and maybe like an excerpt and a link so that you can click on one to visit the individual URL for just that specific blog post. So here's how you do that. Back in index.php, we can leave the heading level 1 for now. But below it, imagine we want to loop through our blog posts. To do that, you're going to enter PHP mode. So that's $PHP, and then you can drop down a few lines and close out of PHP, so $greater than. And then below that, imagine if you wanted like your footer to sit down here. So within this PHP block, we can do something dynamic. We can query the database for our blog posts and display them. So here's how you do that. In the PHP area, so right about here, I'm going to say while, parentheses to call that, and then after the parentheses, curly brackets. Inside the curly brackets, you can drop down. But in the while parentheses, we need to spell out a condition. So we're saying while there are posts, and while we have not looped through all of them, just keep looping through them, like display all of the posts. Now, luckily, you and I don't have to manually spell out that condition. Like, we don't have to go query the MySQL database. We don't have to figure out, like, are there still posts left to loop through? WordPress has a function just called have_posts. So this is all that you and I have to do is just call this function that has this exact name, have_posts, parentheses to call it. Okay, and then in these curly brackets, you can see I've dropped down. We just need to call a function called the_post, semicolon. This will get all of the data ready for the specific post that we've looped to, and it will increment the count so that after this, it can move on to the next post and the next post and the next post. But check this out. After we call the post, semicolon, we're going to exit PHP right here. And then right before this closing curly bracket right here, just jump back into PHP. And the magic of this is that now on this line, we are back into HTML mode. So now you could do anything you wanted once for each blog post. Like if you literally just wanted the word hello, type that in, hit save, refresh. I was expecting to see 5 or 10 hellos. This is because in a previous video in this tutorial, I set my homepage to be a static page instead of a blog listing. Let me show you how you could change that. I mean, it's totally up to you, but in your dashboard under settings, the subpage under settings called reading, instead of a static page for your front page, you could say that your homepage, by default, WordPress is going to set your homepage to just show your latest posts. So this is what I was assuming I had it set to. But if I save that and refresh the front end of my website, yes, you're just going to see hello once for each post that you have. Well, by default, I think it will limit it to the 10 most recent posts. But we can do better. We don't actually want to just output the word hello. We would want to show the title and have a link that you could click on to go to that specific post, so on and so forth. So instead of just hello here, let's get rid of hello. Instead, I'm going to have div and then hit tab. And inside that div, let's have maybe like a heading level 2. And then inside that, that would be a link that you could click on. So A and then hit tab. For the URL that you visit for now, let's just put a placeholder hashtag or £. Inside the A sandwich, to output the actual title of the current blog post, you would just go into PHP mode and just say, or call a function called the_title, parentheses to call it. So if you save that and refresh, I mean, you're already in business. However, they don't have the URL value. Like when you try to click on one, nothing happens. So to bring that to life, instead of this placeholder value for href equals quotes, inside there, just go into PHP and there's a function called the_permalink, parentheses to call it, save that, refresh, and now I can click on bean salad. It takes me to a URL just for bean salad, or like I can click back, click on chocolate chip cookie, you get the idea. However, you're probably realizing when you're on the individual screen for just one blog post, it doesn't really make sense for the title to be a link that you can click on. We would only want it to be a link on the overall listing screen. So how can we have completely different templates for our homepage versus the individual screen for a blog post? Currently, I can let you know that our index.php file is controlling every single URL on our website. So not just the homepage and the individual post, but like even a category. If you look at this URL, this is my category URL for just posts that have a category of recipes, or like this is the URL for posts that only have a category of news. And index.php is controlling all of those screens. So the way that you start to customize the different URLs and pages of your website is to create different template files in your theme. Check this out. If we create a new file in our folder and we give it this exact name of single.php, this file controls the individual blog post screen. So instead of typing everything out again, just take everything in index.php, so Control or Command A to select everything, and then Control or Command C to copy it into your clipboard, Control or Command V to paste it into single.php, and let's just make it so the heading is not a link. So just remove the opening A tag, and then remove the closing A tag, and maybe below the heading level 2, let's output the content. So I might have a div and hit tab, and you could, for CSS reasons, you might want to like give it a class of content. This is totally up to you. But inside the div sandwich, we're just going to go into PHP and call a function of, you guessed it, the_content. So you can save that. You can refresh. Now your homepage didn't change. Your category archive screens didn't change. But if you refresh the view for one individual blog post, it absolutely changed. So now this is not a link, and there we see the actual dynamic, blog content for that post. I can go back and I can click on chocolate chip cookie. We're in business. So this screen is index.php. This screen is single.php. If you wanted to control one of your archive screens, so like this URL is for my category, or like this URL is for a yearly archive, right? All posts from 2024, or like this URL would show you all posts from December of 2024. So if you want to categorize these types of screens, well, you just create a new file in your theme with the exact name, so a new file of archive.php. I would just take index.php, copy that entire content in archive.php, paste it in, but maybe below the heading level 1, let's create a heading level 2, and let's just go into PHP mode for the content and just say the archive title, parentheses to call that. And then since we used a heading level 2 here, let's change this to be a heading level 3 instead, just for accessibility or SEO reasons. If we save that, if we refresh, cool. So now my category screen for recipe posts, we see this title, or this one, if I refresh, it says category news. This one says year 2024. This one says month, December 2024. So you're starting to get the idea. You create different templates or different files, and they are responsible for different types of URLs. If you wanted to control the template for one individual page instead of one individual post, you would create a file named page.php. Now, I will let you know that index.php is the fallback. It's not your homepage. If you wanted to control your homepage, you can create a file called front-page.php. For example, I'll just create a heading level 1 that says my homepage. If I save that and refresh and just go back to my homepage URL, well, you get the idea, my homepage. So now you might be wondering, okay, but then what is index.php for? Index.php is just a fallback in case there's not a more appropriate specific tool for the job. A great example for this would be like if you visited just one of your pages, because I have not created a page.php file yet. So notice, like if I visit my About Us page, the title is a link, meaning it's using index.php because there is no specific or appropriate page.php file. To fix that, you would just create so new file, page.php, and then you could just reuse single.php, paste that in for page, and just to prove a point to yourself, maybe like before the heading level 2, you could say, this is a page, not a post. Give that a save, refresh. I think you're starting to get the idea. Where it gets really fun for me is when you realize that these template names, they play nicely with custom post types. So in a previous lesson, we set up a custom post type called pets. And like if I visit the individual screen for barks a lot, right, it's my domain and then /pet/barks a lot. Currently, this is using single.php because it is indeed a post. What if I wanted to control what a individual or single pet looks like? You just create a new file and you have to give it this exact name. It's single dash, but then whatever the short name for your post type is. So mine is pet. So single-pet.php. And then to save some boilerplate, I would just go into single.php, copy that, paste it in, and then maybe right before the heading level 2, just have a paragraph that says, this is a pet, not a post. If you save that and refresh, you get the idea. Let's move on to a new topic, because at this point, you're probably starting to realize that a lot of duplication is building up. Across our different templates, they all have the same header and footer, right? So like we've duplicated this heading level 1 welcome to our website across various different files. Also, right, the footer paragraph. You don't want to repeat yourself like that in the world of programming, so how can we have just one centralized place where we spell out what HTML should be in our header? Well, you may have guessed it. It's super intuitive. You just create a file in your folder with the exact name, so new file. This is a shocker, right? It's header.php. We can circle back to this file in just a minute and talk about what I would actually place in this file. But for now, let's just say like my super useful header. Go ahead and save that file, and I'm going to close out all my files, and I want to show you how to leverage or use that file. Let's start with, let's see, what are we looking at here? Let's just go in alphabetical order. So the first file is archive.php. So go into that, get rid of this current heading level 1, and instead you would just drop into PHP. You can close out of PHP as well, and just call the built-in WordPress function of get header, parentheses to call it. If we save that and refresh and go look in an archive screen, cool. So like this is my recipes category archive. There we see my super useful header. So you could just copy that line of code now, the PHP and the get header, just copy that and just use that in all of your files. So in this one, I would just paste it at the top, not inside of header, but like inside of index, just use that at the top. Inside of page.php, use that at the top. Inside of single pet, use it at the top. Inside of single, cool. So now I've used that in all of my files. So now if I ever need to make changes to my header, I can just edit this one, right, single source of truth for what my header should be. Let's do the same thing, but with our footer. So you would just create a new file with the exact name of footer.php. For now, let's just say like my cool footer. And then to use that, let me close out all of my files. Let's go into archive. So down here, you could get rid of that hard-coded footer. Instead, you just go into PHP, close out of PHP, and call get_footer, parentheses to call it. Go ahead and save that, and then I would just copy that into my clipboard, and then just use that in all of my files. So not in footer, but in front page, right? The footer can go down here. Not in header, but like in index, replace the footer, in page.php, in single.pet, and in single. Cool. So you refresh and now you have a global or universal footer. At this point, you're probably starting to wonder though, how do we add styling or design or CSS? Your first instinct might be to go into header.php, and be sure to do this with me. So right now, go into header.php with me, delete everything in this file, and then type in doc and hit tab. That's only going to work in VS Code or similarly configured text editors, but that gets you this bit of HTML boilerplate. And before we forget, up at the very top on our first line, even before the HTML line, let's be sure to have a doc type. So less than, exclamation, doc type HTML greater than. Now, back to the task at hand. If you're wanting to add a CSS file, your first instinct is to probably, inside this head area, like maybe below the title, like right about here, just manually load a CSS file yourself. We actually do not want to do that in the world of WordPress. Instead, we want to call a WordPress function, and we're sort of handing off the responsibility to load assets to WordPress. And then in 30 seconds, I'll show you how to load an asset. But do this with me. Inside the head section, so right about here, we're going to say, first we're going to drop into PHP and just say WP_head, parentheses to call it. Right, we're in the HTML head section, so this is just going to let WordPress handle things for us. With this line of code in place, now we can delete the title, right? We don't want to hard code the document title to just document for every page on our website, so you can delete the title tag like this. But before we save this file, let's not forget that we're inside of header.php, meaning all of this is fine, but we don't want to close out the body tag and the HTML tag. We would do that in our footer file. So get rid of the closing body and HTML tags, and now let's save this file and then go into your footer.php, get rid of my cool footer. Instead, I would have like a paragraph that says footer content will go here. And then below that, close out the body tag and close out the HTML tag. But then right before the closing body tag, we want to give WordPress the final say or the final chance to do something dynamic. So go into PHP and just call the built-in WordPress function of WP_footer. You can go ahead and give that a save. And now if you refresh on the front end of your website, if you're logged in, you should now see like the typical WordPress admin bar. But notice up in the tab title, we're not seeing like a dynamic title value. Like you might expect to see like, because this pet is called bear, somewhere in the tab, or like, on your homepage, or like this is the category archive for news. So how do you make sort of the document title come to life? We need to tell WordPress that our theme supports that feature. How in the world do we do that? Well, anytime you're trying to do something programmatically, meaning it's not tied to a specific template, well, you just create a brand new file in your theme folder, and it's called functions.php, and it needs to have that. All of these, by the way, they need to match these file names exactly so WordPress knows where to find them. But functions.php is where, you guessed it, we can spell out functions. Let's create our first function right now together, and we can name it anything we want. So say function, and you could literally name it unicorn, parentheses, and then curly brackets. I will let you know we absolutely need to start this file by entering PHP mode. So less than $PHP. It's a best practice though, you do not close this file with a closing PHP tag. So we don't need anything at the bottom, but we do need to enter PHP mode. Cool. Inside of our function that we called unicorn just for the fun of it, you could also call it pizza, but inside the body or the curly brackets of our function, let's say add theme support, parentheses to call that, and there's underscores in between those words. And let's say, quotes, title dash tag. Be sure to end that line with a semicolon. I would just duplicate that line, and then on the second copy inside these quotes, say, post dash thumbnails. Let me explain what in the world's going on. So this is how you opt in. We're telling WordPress, hey, we do want to use the dynamic title value. Like, please do give our document an appropriate value here. And then this line of code, I'm saying, hey, we want to support featured images. Post thumbnails is just another phrase for featured image, right? For a post or a page or a pet. So by default, these features are not enabled or turned on, but this is how you turn them on. But if we save this file currently, that's not going to do anything. Like if I save and refresh, notice I still don't have a dynamic document title value. So this is where we created our function, but now we need to use WordPress's hook system to tell WordPress, hey, use our function at a specific time. So below our function, like after the closing curly brackets, we're going to say add underscore action, parentheses, semicolon. Inside the parentheses, we're going to give it two things. So A comma B. The first thing we're going to give it, so instead of the A placeholder, let's get rid of the A and say quotes. And let's say after underscore setup underscore theme. So I did not make this value up. You want to use this exact value. But then instead of the B placeholder after the comma, this would be quotes and then whatever you named your function. So I named mine pizza. Now if you save and refresh, notice you do indeed see those dynamic document title values. Cool. So we just opted into that feature as well as featured images. Awesome. Now, at this point, let's get back to the task at hand. Remember, we wanted to learn how to add a CSS file, like load a CSS file on our website. Because currently, like if I go into style.css and I say, you know, that like my body should use color orange and save, you would think that because we're using style.css and that's what's containing our theme name, you would assume that that would load, but it doesn't. So you could sit here and click refresh a million times. It's not going to load your CSS. Now, this is where the video, if we go back into functions.php, this is where I don't want this video to turn into an encyclopedia. There's not much value in me like spelling out every little feature of WordPress and like memorizing things together because we live in the era of ChatGPT. So up until this point in the video, I'm not so much trying to get you to memorize everything we're doing. I'm trying to have you actually understand these concepts, right? Like there's different templates. They're responsible for different URLs. Functions.php is not a template. It's where you programmatically like register your functions. But from this point forward, let's just use ChatGPT. So let's go over here and say in WordPress, in my functions.php theme file, how do I actually load my style.css file on my front end? Cool. Now it's going to spell out exactly what you would do. So it's going to give you just this little block of code. So you can just copy that into your clipboard, come back into functions.php, paste it in. But I'll let you know that all it's doing is it's adding an action just like we did up here. The specific WordPress name. So this is why I had you search for this. I don't remember what this is. I mean, if I really searched my memory, I probably could have remembered this. WP underscore on queue. And I always misspell the word on queue, but scripts, right? But then this is a made up function name, and that's what's registering here. So instead of this, you could have called this like blue sky unicorn or my files. But then whatever you named it, that just needs to match this exact value here, right? It's going to use your function. So if I save that and refresh my front end, cool, it's actually receiving that CSS, color orange. Now let's practice like how would you add your own JavaScript file? Like imagine in the root of your folder, you have a new file and name it like main.js. And inside that file, let's have an alert that says, this is JavaScript. So how in the world would you load that inside of functions.php? Again, I would just use ChatGPT. I know that there's a function, I believe it's like WP on queue script. But instead of worrying about memorizing something like that, I think it's a lot easier to just say, cool. And how would I load a JavaScript file named main.js? Just ask it, scroll down a little bit. Cool, so it's in that same WordPress action hook, WP on queue scripts, but then this little bit of code inside the function that it's spelling out, WP on queue script, and then it has like what, 3 or 4 arguments. I would just copy that little bit of code and then back in VS Code. So inside my files function, like right after the on queue style, but still inside that overall function, I just paste in my clipboard right there. Now, the code that ChatGPT gives you is not always going to be foolproof. In this case, this will not work because it's going to try to look in a subfolder of JS. We don't want that, so I would get rid of that. Right? It's just in the root of my folder called main.js. Also, I don't want to have jQuery as a dependency. So for this value, instead of array of jQuery, I would just give it null. But everything else looks pretty good. So I'll save that, and if I refresh the front end of my website, there we see the JavaScript alert pop up. So at this point, you've now loaded CSS, you've loaded JavaScript, You could refer back to earlier videos in this playlist series where we learned about CSS and JavaScript, but the idea is that you now have an environment where you are in 100% control of the HTML markup, the CSS, the JavaScript, the data, the queries that you want to perform. Like I'll give you a bit of a homework challenge right now. Remember frontpage.php? Right? Currently it just says my homepage. You could perform your own custom WP query to load like maybe only dogs that are over a certain weight, or anything that you can imagine. Those same skills that we learned a few lessons ago, where we were performing custom queries inside of our custom block type, all of that same code works here in these files. The sky is the limit. The only limit at this point is your own skills, like your own CSS and JavaScript skills. So let's do this. If you have any really basic questions where you'd really just be asking me like, hey Brad, do you have ABC memorized? I recommend asking those questions to ChatGPT. However, if you have a big picture conceptual question and you want to see me cover something in a future video, something's really not making sense, you're wondering why we're doing what we're doing, or like what a best practice is, so on and so forth, just let me know down in the comments below and I'll try my best to cover it in a future video. But that is going to bring this lesson to a close, right? You have now created a classic theme that's pulling in dynamic data. Awesome. If you're enjoying this video and enjoying this series and you want to help support this YouTube channel, the best way is to visit my website, learnwebcode.com. You can check out my Patreon. The #1 perk is to have your name featured in the closing credits of my videos. There's similar perks through the YouTube channel membership. I have many different courses that you can join. The best way to support me there would be to join my premium bundle that comes with 6 courses and an exclusive Discord chat group. But one by one, you can join my courses on Udemy or Teachable. For the last 19 years, I've used DreamHost to host all of my WordPress websites. I've had amazing experiences. If you use my link to DreamHost, I will receive compensation for sending new users their way. That's a great way to support this channel. You can join my email newsletter. You can follow me on different social media. That's about it. Thank you so much for watching this video until the very end. I hope you feel like you learned something, and stay tuned for the next video. This video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I don't have any producers yet, but your name could go here. But I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Rodney, David, Lena's, Demetris, and Kenneth for being sponsor tier members over on Patreon. Really appreciate that support. Take care everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.